Hello, online pipe community. Ethan, parsimonious piper, and once more I am together with,
Butter Piper.
and we are going to be diving right into letter 26 of C.S. Lewis' Screwtape letters. Father Brian, take it away.
My dear Wormwood, yes, courtship is the time for sowing those seeds which will grow up 10 years later into domestic hatred. The enchantment of unsatisfied desire produces results which the humans can be made to mistake for the results of charity. Avail yourself of the ambiguity in the word love. Let them think they have solved by love problems they have, in fact, only waived or postponed under the influence of the enchantment. But at last you have your chance to foment the problems in secret and render them chronic. The grand problem is that of unselfishness. Note once again the admirable work of our philological arm in substituting the negative unselfishness for the enemy's positive charity. Thanks to this, you can, from the very outset, teach a man to surrender benefits, not that the others may be happy in having them, but that he may be unselfish in foregoing them. That is a great point gained. Another great help, where the parties concerned are male and female, is the divergence of view about unselfishness, which we have built up between the sexes. A woman means by unselfishness chiefly taking trouble for others. A man means not giving trouble to others. As a result, a woman who is quite far gone in the enemy's service will make a nuisance of herself on a larger scale than any man except those whom our Father has dominated completely. And conversely, a man will live long in the enemy's camp before he undertakes as much spontaneous work to please others as a quite ordinary woman may do every day. Thus, while the woman thinks of doing good offices and the man of respecting other people's rights, each sex, without any obvious unreason, can and does regard the other as radically selfish. On top of these confusions, you can now introduce a few more. The erotic enchantment produces a mutual complacence in which each is really pleased to give in to the wishes of the other. They also know that the enemy demands of them a degree of charity which, if attained, would result in similar actions. You must make them establish as a law for their whole married life that degree of mutual self-sacrifice which is at present sprouting naturally out of the enchantment, but which, when the enchantment dies away, they will not have charity enough to enable them to perform. They will not see the trap, since they are under the double blindness of mistaking sexual excitement for charity and of thinking that the excitement will last. When once a sort of official, legal, or nominal unselfishness has been established as a rule for the keeping of which their emotional resources have died away and their spiritual resources have not yet grown, the most delightful results follow. In discussing any joint action, it becomes obligatory that A should argue in favor of B's supposed wishes and against his own, while B does the opposite. It is often impossible to find out either party's real wishes. With luck, they end by doing something that neither wants, while each feels a glow of self-righteousness and harbors a secret claim to preferential treatment for the unselfishness shown and a secret grudge against the other for the ease with which the sacrifice has been accepted. Later on, you can venture on what may be called the generous conflict illusion. This game is best played with more than two players, in a family with grown-up children, for example. Something quite trivial, like having tea in the garden, is proposed. One member takes care to make it quite clear, though not in so many words, that he would rather not, but is, of course, prepared to do so out of unselfishness. The others instantly withdraw from their proposal, ostensibly through their unselfishness, but really because they don't want to be used as a sort of lay figure on which the first speaker practices petty altruism. But he is not going to be done out of his debauch of unselfishness either. He insists on doing what the others want. They insist on doing what he wants. Passions are roused. Soon someone is saying, very well, then, I won't have any tea at all. And a real quarrel ensues with bitter resentment on both sides. You see how it is done? If each side had been frankly contending for its own real wish, they would all have kept within the bounds of reason and courtesy. But just because the contention is reversed and each side is fighting the other side's battle, all the bitterness which really flows from the thwarted self-righteousness and obstinacy and from the accumulated grudges of the last 10 years is concealed from them by the nominal or official unselfishness of what they are doing, or at least held to be excused by it. Each side is, indeed, quite alive to the cheap quality of the adversary's unselfishness and of the false position into which he is trying to force them. But each manages to feel blameless and ill-used itself, with no more dishonesty than comes natural to a human. A sensible human once said, if people knew how much ill-feeling unselfishness occasions, it would not be so often recommended from the pulpit. And again, she's the sort of woman who lives for others, and you can always tell the others by their hunted expression. All this can be begun even in the period of courtship. A little real selfishness on your patient's part is often of less value in the long run for securing his soul than the first beginnings of that elaborate and self-conscious unselfishness which one may one day blossom into the sort of living I have described. Some degree of mutual falseness, some surprise that the girl does not always notice just how unselfish he is being can be smuggled in already. Cherish these things, and above all, don't let the young fools notice them. If they notice them, they will be on the road to discovering that love is not enough, that charity is needed and not yet achieved, and that no external law can supply its place. I wish Slum Trimpet could be something about undermining that young woman's sense of the ridiculous. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Well, isn't it interesting how he continues this theme that he's visited before of taking something good and twisting it into something bad? Here, he starts out by talking about the relation between a man and woman, in particular, as Screwtape uh, is prepping his young uncle or his young nephew to get these young people prepared in the right way for marriage, so that 10 years down the road they will have some resentments building up. And he says, look, in courtship, there's this natural desire to please each other. This carries over into the early stages of marriage, where the desire to sexually satisfy your partner, it comes naturally because you enjoy it too. But what happens when all of that burns off, and you no longer have that burning, throbbing desire for each other? And he takes this and moves it into a platonic realm as well. In talking about, well, what if you've got a group of people deciding what to do, and one of them proposes tea, or tea is proposed, and one of them doesn't want to do it? Well, you have the same kind of thing that winds up happening down the road in marriage, where you go along with something just because it's either we've either expected and established this rule that this is how we're going to do things, even if the other doesn't want to do it, and we wind up resenting each other. And that's how he wants to undermine marriage, is by setting up these expectations that the warm fuzzies and the hots for each other that exist in that early phase of marriage are going to last forever. And when they are gone, or have subsided, that somehow the expectation is still there that all of the performance that was driven by that youthful exuberance is somehow still going to be there. Uh, and this turns around then in the Platonic sense in this notion that, well, somebody in the group doesn't really want to do it, but they're not going to just come out and say, well, I would rather do such and such. Instead, they put on the airs, whether they do it directly or subtly, of letting you know that they don't really want to do it, but that they're going along, then, and that this is just a bit of unselfishness on their part. Well, in friendships, just like in the marriage relationship, it's really easy for us to wind up doing things that we like doing together. You got golf buddies, and you spend a lot of time doing golf because, well, that's a common passion. Well, what happens when one of you becomes chronically unable to play golf anymore? Does the friendship continue? Do you find other things to do? Uh, that type of thing is is analogous to his marriage example, and this this notion that, oh yes, well, I will go along, even though that's not really what I want to do. That's not true unselfishness. It's what we have labeled to be, oh, well, I'm being unselfish because I'm doing, no, you're not. You're being very selfish because you're drawing attention to just how unselfish you are. you're you're drawing this vain glory to yourself, when in truth, everyone would be better off if things were flipped around. And we go back to his opening examples, the difference between the sexes. Women tend, by being unselfish, to mean actually going out of their way to take on the troubles of other people. Men simply try to stay out of each other's way and not cause more trouble. One is active, the other is passive. Screwtape notes that a woman who is far gone in the enemy's service is going to cause a lot more trouble, is going to be much bigger nuisance, because she really is not just unselfish, but charitable toward other people. She is desiring to do the good of the other, not just avoiding what she doesn't want to do, or pretending to go along. Whereas men, we tend to, well, just stay out of each other's way and not trample on each other's freedoms and liberties, and we think of that as being unselfish. Well, maybe it is, but is it charitable? Is it actually loving? Um, Maybe not. There are times when, as men, we need to stomp on each other's toes just a little bit if we're going to actually be loving, in order to bring attention to things that another person is doing that are self-destructive or sinful. And so this notion that, well, I'm being unselfish, I'm letting him just do what he wants to do. Now, that may be true in some sense. Doesn't mean it's being helpful. It doesn't mean that you're doing what is good for either one of you in the long run. And so there's this very profound distinction that's being drawn here between a passive unselfishness, which really winds up being self-centered, and a proactive charity, which Screwtape, or Lewis through Screwtape uses the word love a couple of times, when and to mean the warm fuzzy type of romantic love, and charity in the biblical sense to mean a more the agape type, caring for the best of the other person love. And here there is a big difference between a very passive unselfishness where you simply let the other do what they want, and an active charity, an active love that proactively goes out and does what is in the best interest of that other person.
And this letter made me think of a homily or sermons, depending on how somebody puts it, that I've put together over the years, and I'll do it in different ways. But I'll talk about the sin of being nice, and I'll tell people, don't be nice, be loving, be charitable, as Lewis will be using it, and to do exactly what Screwtape doesn't want, to be able to talk, to be able to start thinking and talking about what's the difference between being charitable and loving and being nice, or as Lewis puts it, being unselfish. And so that sense of being unselfish, or as I've put it, the sin of being nice is I'm going to do something or not do something for someone else, but I'm not 100% invested in that decision or act. There is some sort of pretense that is with it, whether, as Lewis puts it, a sense of vanity, or look, I'm going to be unselfish. And the and this is where Screwtape, they're very good, because they can just pervert that just enough, because we don't we we don't think that we're being vain. We're not. We actually, in a sense, do think we're being charitable. But if we scratched the surface, that could get scratched very quickly. And something that comes to mind, I'll use for myself, is I remember one time I was in the grocery store. Not one time, been many times in the grocery store. I was dressed as a priest, and I always joke with myself that whatever line I get into, I should always apologize to the person in front of me, because it's always the longest line. There's just something that's going to make that line long. So I remember one particular time, I was dressed as a priest. I only had a cart, but it was, I'd say, medium full. It wasn't overflowing. I didn't only have 3 items. And I happened to notice the person behind me only had a couple things in their hand. So in my mind, I thought, oh, again, how much I thought of this consciously, I don't know. But, I'm going to be nice. I'll let them go ahead of me. And what ended up happening is that person was not alone. They had a person behind them, with them, that had a full cart of stuff. And that person took full advantage of my unselfishness and went ahead. And before I know it, I'm like, in my mind, I'm seething. I'm angry, because it's like, are you serious? I'm thinking I was being nice and letting you go ahead because you had a few things. And what am I being mad? I'm being mad because this person took me up on my charity. And of course, I look like a priest, so I can't back out of that charitable act and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had somebody behind me." So I had to let them go through. And in my mind, all that charity, which it wasn't, it was nice or unselfishness. I always joke, any merit I could have gained in Christ, I lost it all interiorly, because I was so angry that this did not go the way it was supposed to go. And I look back and I can say that I was truly, quote, being unselfish, or I was being nice. And interiorly, let's just say, I was not doing a good job.
Well, that is such a humorous example, but it's spot on perfect for the difference between just being unselfish and being charitable. Because as you point out, uh, you know, you thought you were being unselfish, but your reaction points out that you weren't really being charitable toward this person at all. You didn't have their true best interest in heart, partly because you didn't have the full information. You didn't know that they had a massive set of groceries that they needed to get through. But that is such a funny, revealing uh, example. It perfectly highlights the difference between the a passive unselfishness where we think, oh, I'm going to do a good thing, instead of thinking, what's the best thing for this person behind me? And then still being happy about it when they turned out to have 500 things in their cart, and it was still better for them than waiting behind you. Your your heart desire wasn't the best outcome for them, and oh my goodness, is that great? Because who of us has not been there in that exact situation? And this is what Screwtape so wants to be able to foment in his nephew's patient, is to plant seeds that will cause that exact kind of rift in the coming marriage to this young woman. And he what's the slim trumpet slum trumpet, I think,
Yeah.
the demon assigns to the young lady. He so wants the two of these wormwood to be able to foster these seeds that down the road are going to erupt uh, in acts of violent unselfishness back and forth, and destroy the marriage, and in their hope, undermine the faith of both of these people. And boy, can that so easily be done if we're not careful and and guard our motives. And funny, people will say, well, you did the right thing, what difference does it make? Well, it didn't make any difference at all to the other person. But as you said, your anger and interior, that hurts, but it doesn't hurt the other person. When we do things like this and come to resent them, it it hurts us. There isn't any harm necessarily outside of that, but the motivation that we do things with really is as important as the fact that we do them.
And it really challenges us. Now that reading this letter, it challenges us to think about that balance of being able to share what I want and what I desire, and being able to, because if I don't share maybe what I want or desire, then how can I truly be charitable? And 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 that's exactly what Screwtape says at the end of the letter is, don't let them think about this. Don't let them have a discussion about their true desires and
Right.
wants. And it's like I said, it's so subtle, but it's so powerful, uh, to be able to share that. And because, there could be an immediate uh, conflict or something like that, but there can be beauty and real discussion and real discernment if you think of a couple like courting and dating, if they can start to get that out with each other, hopefully in a healthy way, and so forth. um, what a long lasting marriage to be able to talk out things and then allow one of them to be able to be charitable. And we really can't get to that place unless we can truly somehow express our desires and wants. And that's the balance without ultimately going down a road of selfishness or self-centeredness. And so I appreciate Lewis in this letter really giving some thought to that balance of unselfishness and yet charity. So yeah, I do appreciate it.
I do as well. I wish in some ways that he had pushed further in the platonic example, because there really is such a parallel. When you first make friends with someone, in a lot of ways you're in the same kind of a honeymoon phase in your relationship. Everything's great about the other person. You guys have a blast when you're together. You can't do anything but laugh and have fun. And then 6 months down the road, you find out X about the other person, and all of a sudden, it's just the same way that things like this crop up in marriage. Um, Although his real purpose here is in undermining that that bedrock of our culture, of our society, which marriage is, and being able to tear that apart. And tearing apart platonic friendships is not quite the same, but it is good that he does at least point it out that this can affect all of us. This false unselfishness. Does that mean we're supposed to be selfish? No, of course not. We are supposed to be unselfish, but truly unselfish in that we're not thinking about ourselves at all. That we're not thinking, oh, the silly example of tea. Well, I don't really want to do tea. Real unselfishness looks at the other and says, oh, they would really like to do tea. May not be my thing, but let's do it for them, for their pleasure. And you've flipped it around from this passive and false unselfishness that Screwtape wants to encourage to a true unselfishness where your real motivation is the other person. And that's the charity, the mature charity that he warns against in that last page.
Yeah, he does it. And it just brings to mind the sexes, the difference of how, I mean, how real it is.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not being of the married vocation, but yet as a leader or pastor, many of my, those who work with me, employees, are usually women, and are usually female. And I could have used this advice many times years ago, of where I thought I was helping out. I was being unselfish. I wouldn't use that word, but I'll use it now. And it really bit me, because the other, and many time of the female working in the parish or the church, looked at my unselfish acts or lack thereof as men. We try, our act of unselfishness is not causing more trouble. Many times looked at, I didn't care, or aloof, or whatever it might be. And then when it's taken the wrong way, I'm interiorly infuriated because I was being nice.
Yeah.
And then you can see where Screwtape just gets that little wedge more and more and more. And that's what I know for myself. But he's telling all of us is we got to have that honest discussion with ourselves, with God, and hopefully be able to have it with one another.
Absolutely. Well, folks, I thought that I thought this was just a great one, because it does apply to all of us, and I hope that you're pulling something out of this the same way I have. I will tell you, go forth and don't be unselfish. I know that sounds contradictory. Be charitable instead, and while you do, like something you like. Till next time.